Hello students, welcome back to the Analyst for 21st of August 2024, where we will be discussing 9 most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. In the very first article, we'll be looking into the government aspirations toward the blending of ethanol and the various steps taken by the government in that direction. In the next article, we'll be looking into the various challenges and the opportunities and the government's initiatives taken towards the Indian handloom sector. In the third article, we'll be looking into the recent Sikkim landslides and the various measures and the deliberations regarding landslides in the country. In the next article, we'll be looking into the liberalized remittance scheme regarding a recent data from the RBI. In the next article, we'll be looking into the tiger deaths and the various aspects related to tiger conservation in the country. At the end, we'll be concluding with Prelims Snippets, where we'll be discussing news in shorts, which is extremely crucial for your prelims examination. So stay tuned. So students, in the very first article, we'll be looking into ethanol blending program of India. And this article will be a critical discussion on the scope and the status of ethanol blending in the country. And this is a very important topic for UPSC prelims under ecology, environment and the biodiversity implications for India, and also for GST, where we have to look at the conservation part. And here, when we talk about the ethanol blending program, it is actually a very important part of a broader national policy on biofuels 2018. Now, under this policy, the main objective of the country is to reduce dependence on imported fossil fuel. We know that India as a country is largely dependent on the crude oil imported from the Gulf nations, from the other countries. So that is why, if we understand the majority of the foreign exchange of our country, it is depleted due to the large amount of imports of fossil fuels, and this is why we have to reduce our dependency on that aspect. In the next one, we have to achieve energy security, which is a very crucial aspect of self-reliance if we want to achieve India's Atmanirbharta. Within the next decade or so, we have to become largely self-dependent on ourselves when it comes to the fossil fuel requirements or all of the energy requirements, be the renewable energy side or sustainable fuels, which are the types of biofuels in the country, right? Then we also have to keep in mind the commitments that India has made at the Paris climate deal, and also as a part of India's broader climate framework of reducing the reducing the net emissions to zero by 2070. And this is what we mean by environmental sustainability, when we have to achieve the non-fossil fuel capacity, and also we have to diversify into wind energy, solar energy, and also we have to look into how to reduce the emission capability of the current fossil fuels. And next, it is also about strengthening the rural ecosystem by actually bringing the farmers and helping them grow some crops that can actually benefit the energy security architecture of the country. And also, alongside, the broader objective of this policy is to help the R&D or research and development of the country propel to such an extent where we can actually generate more and more such biofuels and such other alternative fuels which can help us achieve net zero by 2070. And here, when we look at the components of the national policy on biofuels, the target of ethanol blending or mixing ethanol into the petrol, for example, say take 100 ml of petrol, and within the same we are mixing 20% ethanol. So this is the target that India has to achieve, of blending 20% of ethanol into, say, petrol, into fossil fuel, into diesel or whatever fossil fuel which we are using by 2025-26. So this is the target that we are having. And if we understand, if we can use ethanol in our fossil fuels, it will be increasing the energy or say environmental sustainability, because we are using on our say absolute volume lesser amount of fossil fuels, because a part of it is blended with ethanol. And when we talk about the financial initiatives that are being provided to the various farmers, so there are various incentives such as say interest subvention schemes, funding by the government and the various amount of pricing of the waste materials in the agriculture sector, if that waste can be used for generating the ethanol production. So when we talk about these financial incentives, we have to also talk about the classification of the biofuels in the country according to the National Policy on Biofuels 2018. So we have first generation, second generation, third and fourth generational biofuels. First generation biofuels are made from food related sources. These are generally the fruits, the vegetables, or say the food grains, food crops, which actually have a lot of starch content, right? So the second generation will be having non-food sources such as grasses, which can be used to generate furthermore ethanol that can be blended into, say, various fossil fuels. We can also use algae. Algae can also be used to produce more and more biofuels that can be also blended with petrol or diesel. And finally, the fourth generation is actually the use of genetic modifying organisms, or GMO in the various stages of biofuel production. So this is where we have to understand, as we go from first to second to third and fourth, the cost of R&D increases. So as of now, for the nation, it is easier to actually generate the first generational biofuels from crops such as sugarcane, maize, and so on. So this is where we have to understand, for this one, for actually the ethanol blending to be a practical one, we need proper infrastructure development. Also, we need various amounts of logistic supply chains to actually propel the ethanol to the various petrol or diesel pumps in the country. Then we have to also understand the main component of this scheme is to also research and develop the second, third, and mainly the fourth generational one, right? And finally, it is also about spreading the public awareness between the people of the country. Now, when we talk about ethanol blending, what is the exact method? For example, take the case of sugarcane crop, right? When we cultivate the crop, right, we have to actually understand, when we use the crop sugarcane, right, we get the sugarcane pulp, juice, syrup. After that, we are left with, say, this molasses, right, and the bags. So these are the main, say, used products that we get from the sugarcane. Now, for ethanol blending, for the stages of fermentation, purification, and ethanol blending, we use various amounts of microorganisms such as here Lactobacillus casei. So this is being used to actually convert the sugarcane byproducts into ethanol, and that ethanol is later blended with petrol, diesel, and that is being transported finally to the fuel station. This is the entire supply chain. This was the infrastructure that I was talking about. That is a very important component of this particular policy. Now, when we look at the sugarcane industry in the country, it has generally three byproducts. Firstly, we have sugarcane juice and syrup, B, heavy molasses, and C, heavy molasses category of B and C. So we have to understand the target that we have in the country is achieving 20% blending by 25-26. Right? And this means that we have to convert 1,000 crore liters of ethanol from the sugarcane byproducts, or say from any other first generational, say, raw material. That can be maize, that can be sugarcane, that can be potato, that can be any edible food crops, which is actually the first generational say, raw material. Then when we understand that the status of biofuel, or say the ethanol blending, was 8% in 2021, and that has increased to 13 to 15% in 2023-24. So we understand India is increasingly increasing the production of ethanol blending. And in India, it is the Department of Food and Public Distribution which is actually concerned with the, say, administration of the various supply chain of the sugarcane, or say the crops that can be procured under this particular program. And here we have to understand, as of now, 99% of the blending in with reference to the sugarcane crops, right, when we are trying to achieve ethanol, it is from molasses B and C. And this is the data as of 2022. We do not, as a country, use sugarcane juice and syrup, mainly because this is used for food purposes. So that is why we have to understand we are using say molasses B and C categories. And we have to understand this is also leading to, or this has the potential to save foreign exchange worth of $4 billion annually if we try to achieve that 20% target by 2025-26. So we have to understand that this will be leading or helping us with better amount of government resources for diverting our financial resources into various other welfare sectors, infrastructure sectors, instead of only importing crude oil or raw material, right? Now, when we look into the various challenges, firstly, we have to understand that as of now, the ethanol blending program in the country, or EBP is right now wholly dependent on sugarcane, as we can see here. According to February 2022 data, right, we understand that most of the production of ethanol, blended petrol or diesel in the country is coming from sugarcane juice, right, or various sugarcane molasses categories of B and C. So that is why we have to understand that we are over reliant on a particular crop, because simply we have huge production of sugarcane, and also we have a proper sugarcane meal distribution system, transportation system efficiently in various parts of the country. Next, we also find that a very serious challenge is that there is always a food versus fuel debate when we talk about ethanol blending, because if we are using sugarcane, we are actually diverting the uses of sugarcane from our own consumption of food, from actually to manufacture some fuels, or say blend the particular sugarcane molasses or ethanol into the petroleum, that is a fuel. So we understand this is a debate of food versus fuel, and also we know that in a country like India and various other developing countries too, we have hunger, we have malnutrition. So is it ethical on the part of the government, on the part of the, say, private sector, to actually divert a lot of food resources that can actually feed people into this particular blending program? So this is one example. There is one example of maize imports. India is a country where the production of maize is sufficient, it is very comfortable, but still we are increasingly, over a recent period of time, increasing maize imports, and also we have seen the market prices of maize is increasing. And this is also leading to inflation in the poultry sector. Why? Because most of the maize is being diverted over the blending program, and if that is being diverted, that means maize in India is mostly used in the poultry sector as feedstock. And if feedstock is decreasing for the poultry sector, that means raw material is increasing in prices, because the supply of maize has decreased. So this has actually led to increasing amount of prices in the, say, poultry sector in the country. Next, we also know that sugarcane consumes a lot of water. That means the water demand is actually very high, and also we understand that 50%, if India would also would even have to actualize or say realize 50% of the ethanol blending target, that 50% target would require 400 billion liters of water. So this means that India, always we understand, we see in the news that there are some water crisis, there are some various water ground table depletion in various states and various cities. So this will be exacerbating the situations even more. Then we also understand the cost of second generation, third generation and fourth generation biofuels are actually very high. We know that in the fourth generational biofuel, we need to genetically modify various organisms or use GMOs for, say, the production of ethanol blended petroleum or diesel. So this is where the cost is also very high. We need high amount of technology, better amount of resources. Next, India in 2023 December, it came up with some restrictions on the use of category B and C molasses because of food security concerns. So as of now, we have some restrictions on the use of molasses for the ethanol blending program. This is also leading to increased amount of prices of this particular program. So on the face of it, this program is actually becoming more and more costly for the consumer finally, if there are restrictions on the use of, say, this kind of molasses. Next, we also have environmental implications. Firstly, we understand we are still using fossil fuel. That means if you are blending something, we are still using diesel, we are still using petrol, which are at the end of the day fossil fuels, right? Obviously, the degree of pollution or say the emission is being decreased due to the blending part, but we are still polluting this particular aspect. So we cannot say that is a perfect solution to climate change. Next, also we find that the reduction in fuel efficiency in normal vehicles is seen when we use blended petroleum or blended diesel in vehicles which is not suitable for the ethanol blended engines and so on. So the efficiency is also reduced. And also if we see states like UP, UP is the only state in the country which is trying to implement this program at a world footing, where we have seen states like Tamil Nadu and also some areas in states of Maharashtra which is not properly implementing the same. So disparities at the state level is also there. Next, we have to look into the steps taken by the government to actually try to iron out the various inefficiencies in this program. Firstly, we have this administered pricing mechanism for the pricing of the molasses and all the raw materials that can be used into this particular program, right? And also majority of the policy formulations regarding the pricing aspect come from the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. And also along the same side we have interest subvention scheme, which is a scheme to actually give incentives to the various enterprises, startups who want to establish or expand the ethanol blending mills in the country, or the establishments or the manufacturing units in the country, where the interest subvention can be up to 6% or 50% of the interest rate charged by the bank, right? Also we find tax benefits, tax implications or say subsidies given to the companies when also we have low amount of GST and low amount of excise on the ethanol blended fuels. And also we have manufacturing support for the flex fuel vehicles. Flex fuel vehicles are those vehicles which are compliant to run with the blended ethanol. And here we have flex fuel vehicles, for example E10 vehicles, E20 vehicles, right, which generally means that this vehicle can run up to using 20% of ethanol blended or 10% of ethanol blended in the petrol or diesel. So this is the scheme here. Apart from this, the cabinet also approved back in 2019 the Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Yojana, which is actually a very important initiative to promote the next generation or second generational ethanol projects in the country, where using biomass, using crops residues, using grasses, we can use ethanol. And if we try to understand second generation, third generation and fourth generation, they do not use food crops, right? So that food versus fuel debate will be settled in this particular level. And here when we look at the way ahead, we have to understand that firstly we have to focus on the development of 2G, 3G and 4G ethanol technologies. Indian government has to increase the amount of funds for this particular program. Next, we have to understand that the interest subvention schemes and policies is expiring soon. So the government must be also continuing this particular program to promote more and more MSMEs and startups and also other companies taking loans and setting up more and more ethanol blending projects. Next, the distilleries which try to blend the ethanol in the petrol and also try to extract the ethanol from the raw materials, they must be having long-term contracts with the oil manufacturing companies of the country, particularly when we talk about the government PSU companies. Next, the cultivation of less water-intensive crops must be thought of right now, because we have to understand sugarcane is a water-guzzling crop. Now, in the comment section, can you let me know some of the important crop requirements or climatic requirements of the sugarcane? Next, we have to understand that the regional interest of the country must also be balanced, where all the states, they must be also promoted on the same manner when it comes to the ethanol blending program. And when we try to understand, we have this target of achieving 20% blending by 2025-26. And when we understand that over a period of time, we have seen the sales of petrol when it is blended with ethanol is actually increasing over a period of time. So government must generally try to increase the production even more and try to promote the production of ethanol blending even more, so that it can actually lead to higher revenue via taxes, and also it will be lesser burden on the environment too. And here we have two PYQs from 2010 and 2020, the answers of which, both of which you please let me know in the comments below. Now students, in the next article we'll be looking into India's handloom sector and the various issues and the government steps taken in this particular sector. Because recently the Union Textile Ministry has stated that the government of India has taken many incentives for this sector, and this is highly important for UPSC prelims, where we have economic and social development, for your GS2 where we have various government welfare schemes and policies for the vulnerable sections of the population, and for GS3 when we have to look in the topic of inclusive growth, because one of the stakeholders in inclusive growth are actually the artisans, are actually the various workers working in the handloom sector. Now when we understand the key characteristics of this particular sector, we understand that over thousands of years, India has been the country which has been very famous for the handloom products over a period of time. And when we look at the historical significance of the handloom sector, we can understand that over the wide expanse of the country, in each and every states of the country, we definitely have some traditional, some famous handcraft or handloom goods and say sarees and the various amounts of products out of this particular sector. And this is due to the historical use of various handloom products by say the various tribal sections of the population, via various rural areas of the population, which is also right now becoming very famous. And also when we look at our own independence struggle, we understood the symbolism of using khadi as a self-reliant picture. And also we have to understand the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi, promoted the use, the manufacture, the distribution of India's own khadi that must be spun by our own hands. And this is what we have to understand, that India must actually be proud of its legacy of khadi. And also we may look at the other aspect of this particular sector. This is a labor intensive sector where we know that this industry is a cottage industry where most of the labor, most of the production takes place at the home of the weavers. Also, this is highly decentralized. That means this is generally present in the rural areas and also in the semi-urban and also in the urban areas of the nation, where there is household production of this kind of handloom sector. Next, this sector not only produces saris or clothes, but these have diverse products. As you can see here, across the various states, this map is very important for you, for generally your prelims and also for your overall understanding of this particular sector, that we have diverse products made of handloom. That can be a tablecloth, that can be say chadar, that can be a sari, that can be any other products that we Indians generally use on a day-to-day basis, right? Then we have various regional specialities also, as is also highlighted in this map. So that is why the preservation of this sector is extremely important. And also when we look at the data from the handloom census 2019-20, in India we have 3.52 lakh people working in this sector. So a large source of employment is there, and also a large source of women at the tune of 72% of this entire figure is employed in this sector. So that means that we also understand that if we develop this sector as a whole, we will be also producing a lot of employment opportunities for the women section of the population. Next, also when we look at the home textile say goods that are being produced by this handloom sector, we find that this is around 60% of the overall handloom export of the country. So that means that home textile, home requirements are actually more produced in this particular sector. Next, we understand when we look at the importers, the biggest importer is US, followed by UK, Spain, Australia, and etc. So there is heavy demand of Indian handloom abroad. But there are various issues of this particular sector. Firstly, the issue is generally to the amendment to the flag code that was done in 2022, where the machine-made polyester flags were actually made more prominent, or say the government of India tried to promote the manufacture of more polyester flags. And earlier we have to understand this was the flags were generally manufactured by the handloom sector. And if you are now using polyester flags and on the top of it, no GST also be implied on this particular flags. So we understand the handloom sector will be on the brink of collapse, because a majority of the Indian flags which I've seen, right, they are produced by the handloom sector. They are actually made of textile. Now, if we promote the use of plastic flags, that will be leading to ruin of this particular workers. And also, as we have seen, just after the enactment of this particular amendment, the sales of Khadi national flags were hit due to the polyester variants, which were much cheaper. Right, but at this cheap expense, we find the employment opportunities in sectors can be at a downfall. Next, India is also a net importer of polyester yarn that is majorly imported from China. So this is also causing a dichotomy where we are actually manufacturing flags using imported polyester yarn, plastic yarn from China. Next, the demonetization caused a lot of issue where the amount of capital, amount of cash dwindled with the weavers. They could not receive payments or make payments regularly. That caused a lot of unemployment. So that demonetization which took place in 2016, that issue is still here. After that, the GST was implemented where the small MSMEs or the medium MSMEs, they had to be compliant with the GST norms and regulations. So that also is causing some compliance burden on the weaver side, that they have to register on the portal, they have to keep updates, accounts, and so on. Next, PM Vishwakarma Yojana is actually a central sector initiative to support more and more traditional artisans and crafts. But in this entire list, as we can see here, so they will be getting some credit benefits, some loans from the central government. But in the entire one, we did not see the handloom sector. So that is a very sad emission from this particular scheme. Next, also when we understand that right now government is also promoting semi-mechanized khadi. Now, semi-mechanized khadi is directly running against the idea of Mahatma Gandhi, who actually proposed that khadi, or say the clothes that must be worn by the most of the Indians, that should be made by ourselves. Right? And if we are using machines into the same, that can also lead to the degradation of the quality of khadi too. Next, we also find that as of now, according to recent trends, the export trend of the handloom sector is going down. So there is also a global neglect as of recent times, according to the khadi export that we are talking about. And that is why we also understood that over a period of time, government has actually taken a lot of government schemes, policies to promote the handloom sector. It is not the scene that the government is not doing anything, according to a recent article in a prominent newspaper. Right? Government is actually taking many benefits. And firstly, we have to understand government is giving a raw material supply scheme where for the various raw materials, yarns and say the looms and the various raw equipments, the government will be giving funds to the various registered weavers. Next, the National Handloom Development Program has been conceptualized, which is a broader policy program for the protection, for the guidelines, for the promotion, for the inclusion of the weavers, for the handloom workers in this particular sector. Then we have the Clustered Development Program, right, which is trying to give stipend to weavers under Samarth scheme. Then we have the handloom marketing assistant to various exports, such as textile expo exhibitions at, for example, say Pragati Maidan, at melas, at award ceremonies. So we are actually inviting many weavers, many handloom workers at the various festivals and melas. Then also we are improving the infrastructure, and special projects are also ongoing on the part of various state governments, also by the center government in various tribal areas, and particularly areas which are hit by Naxalism and also by militancy in the JNK and also in the northeast sector, to actually increase the amount of employment in the particular sector. Next, there is also a mega handloom cluster where we are trying to bring in various handloom manufacturers, cottage industries, KVICs, right, into a particular area so that there can be an economy of scale. Next, there is a concessional credit which is given at lower interest rate to the weavers in the form of Weavers Mudra loan, right? And finally, we have weavers, handloom weavers welfare, that is customer care helpline for them to actually get help or assistance with reference to anything that they want. And obviously, we also have this particular award-winning handloom weavers that is above the age of 60, where they will be actually giving pension to the weavers in the country. And here the awardees have been selected from the state of Telangana, where they will be getting a pension of 8,000 every month, and there will be around 30 lakh crore rupees, right, which will be credited to this particular awardees also, right, and the pension will be credited directly to the weaver's bank account through direct benefit transfer. So we also see this kind of promotional schemes and policies undertaken by the government of India. And here, that is why it is the need of the hour to actually the government must understand they must be trying to amend the polyester rules that they amended in 2022, because that is one issue that is being seen right now, right? And alongside, we have one practice question for you all, that is comprehensive support for India's handloom and handicraft sector is a need of the hour. Critically discuss. Now in the comment section, you let me know some of the more steps that the government should take and some of the more important objectives of the handloom sector in the country. And also, as we see right now, right, there is this India handloom brand that India is promoting, where almost 2000 new indigenous products have been registered. So according to this question, you can use this kind of information in the introduction of your answer to actually communicate to the examiner that you definitely know the content of the question. In the next one, we'll be looking into the landslide that recently took place in Sikkim that led to the destruction of a prominent NHPC project, which was actually a 510 megawatt stage 5 dam, a power station. And this is a very important topic for UPSC prelims, where we'll have to look at the Indian and world geography aspects and at DS3 topics of disaster and disaster management. Now, when we talk about landslides are actually the movement of mass of rock, debris or earth down a slope. We'll be talking about very basics here, and it is actually a type of mass wasting. Mass wasting generally refers to the reduction of mass of the geological landforms when it is subjected to various natural or say anthropological measures. And when we talk about the types of landslides, firstly, we have this rotational landslides, where we have the ground rotating below according to a curvature as is seen in this first diagram. So the land curves down and the rest of the upper section, they starts to curve down alongside a slope. So please do notice that for a landslide there must always be a slope, right? Next, we have this translational landslide, which is actually the movement of a large area, right, parallel to the surface. Next, we have this block slide landslide, which is actually a type of translational only, right, but it is mostly one block of surface material that moves down slope. And in this translational landslide, there can be several blocks that can move downwards. In the fourth type, we have this rockfall, which is very simple to understand, which is actually the tumbling block of rocks over the influence of gravity, down the slope. Next, we also have topple, where a section of the rock on the top of the mountain, they break off due to chemical weathering, due to say water weathering, due to many aspects of weathering. They break off a cliff and they go down. Next, we have earth flow, where along an hourglass shape, right, the landslide occurs in this particular fashion. Then we have also lateral sprayed, when surface material extends or spreads on gentle slopes, where the slopes are very gentle, right? It almost feels like the slope is a plain one, but it is actually gentle, and this is generally associated with earthquakes, right? Next, we have also the debris flow, where simply along the high reaches of mountains, due to cloudburst events, due to rainfall events, the rocks starts to come down at a very rapid pace, and the rocks can also flow over a huge distance when it is reaching the plains even. And next, we have this landslide caused by avalanche, which is known as debris avalanche, and also a creep when it is caused by the soil and surface material that slowly moves down the slope, that can take actually over a long period of time. But we have to understand the impacts of landslides in the country. Firstly, we understand recently the landslide that took place at Wayanad. From this news article that you can understand, also this was covered in the previous analyst sessions too, that 17 families in a particular area with 65 members, they were wiped out entirely due to a sudden landslide at Wayanad in Kerala. So a loss of life to humans, to animals is unsurmountable. Next, also we understand the huge amount of property damage, and this is mainly the properties of poor people, vulnerable sections of the population, where they suddenly see that they are shelterless. Next, the economic disruption that follows after landslide to particular amount of families, to the infrastructure of an area, that is also very large. And lastly, we understand the environmental degradation aspect is also crucial, because most often in the landslide scenarios we see soil erosion and deforestation also happening at the same time. So this is where the issue is also prominent. The causes of landslides across the globe are two reasons: firstly, natural and human related factors. Firstly, the geology or the rock type or the structure is very important to understand the cause or potential of an area for landslide, particularly in the hill slopes. The topography, the relief, elevation, how the actual, say, area of a particular mountain is, and the various surrounding plains regarding the same is also very important when we talk about the effects of gravity that can pull down the rocks due to this particular topographical arrangement. Then with reference to climate, the variation of rainfall, temperature can also dictate, because we can have excess amount of rainfall, we can have excess amount of snowfall over an area that can actually cause a huge amount of landslide, as also being seen in recent times. Next, also we have seen the cases of vegetation is also very important. If we have an area of a hill which is heavily forested, then the risk of landslides are very less, because we have vegetation which is actually acting as a natural shock observer, right? So this is where we understand the vegetation can automatically stop. And on the other hand, if we understand that the vegetation cover is less, the soil is very loose, landslides are very prone to happen. Next, natural sources like earthquake and volcanic activity can also cause landslides in very limited areas. Now, when we look at human-induced factors, which is actually the main cause of landslides right now, firstly, deforestation is causing the soil to lose its fertility, to lose its moisture, its texture, and become loose. Whenever we see rainfall, those loose soil come down along with various debris and rock. Next, the unsustainable use of fertilizers, chemicals, in particular agricultural practices on the hilly areas, they are also causing the soil to degrade in quality, and that is also leading to high amount of landslides. And also, when we talk about the increasing amount of tourism at various hill stations of the country, that is also leading to huge amount of construction activities, and that construction activities or those kind of activities are not suitable in ecologically fragile areas which are highly prone to landslides. So we have to understand we cannot play with nature always. So that is why construction activities such as mining, they also degrade the entire area, as we have seen in the case of Aravalli Hills in the Western Ghats, in the northeast areas, in the Himalayan areas, heavy amount of mining, construction activities, road construction, these are taking places. And the deforestation that follows, the disturbance in the rock geology is also there, where the fragility of the rock material due to heavy construction is also seen in the case of breaking off of rocks and landslides. Also, improper waste disposal at various areas of the mountain. This is leading to blockage of the natural flow of water in the heavy or say the high heights, which also causes landslides. According to the landslide vulnerability map of the country, we see that in the country, we have generally three areas. The Himalayan range in the, say, Uttarakhand, Jammu and Kashmir region. Then we have the northeast area, and we have the, say, Western Ghats, which are actually very prone to landslides. And also, if we understand, every year we'll be seeing some news or the other that is actually taking place with reference to flooding of the Assam region, flooding of Western Ghats, as we have seen in the case of Wayanad, right? Heavy amount of flash floods, landslides in the Uttarakhand region, in the Himachal Pradesh areas, in the Kashmir areas. So this is why we have to actually undertake some measures, right? We have to firstly understand that India has taken various measures. Firstly, under the Disaster Management Act of 2005, as to specifically highlighting the various hazards and the various provisions for landslides in the country. Next, we have the National Landslide Risk Management Strategy, which is containing the hazard mapping or say zone mapping of the various vulnerable areas of the country that is prone to landslides. We also have the situation for the provision for early warning system for landslides, so that we can prevent any landslide before it actually take place. But in India, we actually have lack of data with reference to exact timing of previous landslides, lack of data over rainfall, and also we do not have any amount of experimentation research done in similar settings in other countries also with reference to early warning systems. So this is the various challenges we are facing with reference to early warning systems too. Next, when we talk about the guidelines on national hazard management, right, national landslide hazard management is talking about how we can actually reduce the post-disaster and the pre-disaster risks from the landslides by actually having proper amount of urban mapping, proper amount of zone mapping in the hilly areas of the country and also in the areas which are prone to landslides. We have the National Institute of Disaster Management, which have proper protocols, guidelines, training, capacity building for workers in this particular sector. The IMDb is also trying to enhance its weather forecasting by enhancing the employing of various technologies such as supercomputers in their particular model to forecast the rainfall patterns or snowfall patterns that can lead to potential landslides. We also have this landslide risk map developed by IIT Delhi, which is also very, very important initiative. Next, we have the National Landslide Susceptibility Mapping, which the GSI, Geological Survey of India, is carrying out to properly try to assuage the various areas in the country where it's prone to the same. And finally, for the Western Ghats, we have had Gadgil and Kasturi Rangan committee reports. Now, in the previous analysis sessions only we covered regarding the same. Now, anyone, can you tell me what is the main difference between Gadgil and Kasturi Rangan committee recommendations regarding the Western Ghats? Now, in this particular reports, the vulnerability of the Western Ghats through landslides were also highlighted, and a slew of measures were recommended, particularly for denoting the area as ecologically sensitive areas. Now, there must be various way forward, or say the various measures that can be improved over a period of time. Firstly, we must be strictly demarcating ecologically sensitive areas, and we should not be promoting tourism, we must not be promoting mining, no roads must be constructed, everything must be left to the natural side, because we have huge amount of loss of lives, livelihood and so on. Next, we must be using innovative engineering, such as using caisson piles, such as horizontal boring walks, drainage well. As we can see in this particular figure, this particular caisson pile is actually constructed in the ground so that landslide movements will be suspended through the resistance. So we can actually have long pipes inbuilt in this particular areas which can stop the flow of rocks. We can also have this underwater drainage well which can actually suck in the excess water and send it towards the groundwater table. So we must be having innovative engineering. Also, as we can see at this particular, say, landform here, right? There are various measures of using soil nailing steps, where we can use scaffolding of soil nails along the steps, as we can see here, right? We can install steel bar into the various holes and so on. So we can actually reduce the amount of landslide hazard in these areas, right? So a heavy amount of engineering must be done. Next, we must be trying to improve the land use planning, particularly on the slopes. We must not be overdoing the heavy amount of contour farming without any sustainable practices. We must be trying to plant more and more trees, and also in areas where we have degraded, we must be reforesting them to build the proper natural barrier. Then sustainable agriculture practices such as organic farming, such as natural farming, such as agroforestry, such as permaculture, they must be promoted over a period of time. Next, infrastructural development must be halted when it is degrading the mountainous slopes of the country. But infrastructure, when it comes to this amount of engineering, they must be stepped up. Or sustainable infrastructural activities, they must be taken place with proper environmental impact assessment of all the projects that will be constructed in these particular areas. Disaster preparedness and response must be very swift, as also seen in the recent case of Wayanad. We have seen many of our army friends who did not sleep for nights because simply a situation occurred all of a sudden, and all of the force, they have to react suddenly. So we must be increasing the capacity of our staff. We must be employing more and more local people, training them to cope up with this facilities, to cope up with this kind of natural disasters. And then finally, we must be improving awareness and education at the community, at the local grassroots level, by collaborating with the local bodies in the various landslide vulnerable sections. Now, along the same lines, we have two PYQs from 2016 and 21. Firstly, we have to differentiate the causes of landslides taking place in the Himalayan and the Western Ghats. And in 2016, they asked about Himalayas are highly prone to landslides, discuss the causes and suggest suitable measures of mitigation. So we have discussed almost everything. Now, can you in the comment section individually, using your common sense, delineate different causes of Western Ghat landslides and Himalayan region landslides? So 2-3 causes that are unique to both of them, please do let me know. And along the same lines, if I try to give you some value addition here, there is a platform known as Satark, which is an early warning system, which is actually looking into the various vulnerability, say potential landslides in the Western Ghat region. So you can also use these important points in your mains answers. In the next article, we'll be looking into the recent data from the RBI on the outward remittance by Indians, by resident Indians, which actually fell by 44% approximately to around $2.18 billion. And this is a very important aspect under Liberalised Remittance Scheme. Under the Liberalised Remittance Scheme, residents, Indians, they can actually either send, say, a portion of their money abroad for purchasing of goods and services, for various payments to various people outside of the country. So these are the various services that is possible under Liberalised Remittance Scheme, which is a very important topic for UPSC Prelims, Economy and Social Development. And when we talk about this particular scheme, this was brought out by RBI in 2004. And here, this is allowing the residents of the country to remit a certain amount of money during a financial year to any other country for investment or expenditure, both of the same, right? We can either say buy various goods and services, we can actually import, we can actually go abroad on various tour and say various other operations for student studying abroad and so on. We can also invest in various companies in real estate abroad. So these are the various ways in which we can understand this scheme's work. Now, resident Indians can remit up to $250,000 in a particular financial year, but only resident individuals are eligible, not corporations, partnership firms, Hindu undivided family, trust, etc. These are not eligible. Only individual firms, including minors, are eligible for this particular scheme. And what are the permissible current account transactions? These current account transactions are those transactions which do not affect your assets, right, or your liability. Now, what are assets and liabilities? Assets means the property or say the various objects that you own from which you can earn some interest, earn some rent, earn some say capital gains and so on. Liability means that, for example, you have taken a loan, right? This loan principal amount you have to return back to someone else. So in the current account, assets and liabilities are not involved. Now, the permissible capital account transactions are that, for example, if a resident in this particular country, you can visit any other country for tourism, you can give donation, you can go foreign for employment, you can emigrate, you can maintain close relatives abroad who are staying abroad, you can travel for business purpose, study abroad, medical treatment or checkup abroad. So these are the current account which are transactions which are permitted under this scheme. And the the permitted capital account transactions are that you can open foreign currency account abroad, you can purchase property abroad, you can make mutual fund investments abroad, you can acquire equity debt instruments also abroad, you can set up various joint ventures also, and the various gift loans that you can give to the various other relatives NIOs abroad. But note that this particular amount is having a limit up to $250,000, right? This and this both. And this is what we have to understand. The mode is actually, or say that transaction of rupee dollars is actually taking place: bank transfers, demand draft, traveler's check, credit card or debit card. And here recently, according to RBI report, there is a decline in the remittances. Outward remittances has actually declined by 44% almost, where we have seen, right, the main aspect is due to tax collection at source regulations which was implemented by the government of India. Now this tax collection of source, that means, for example, if you are to visit Germany, and at Germany you bought, for example, a t-shirt at a German local store. Now on this t-shirt, for example, this is costing around, say, 1000 rupees in Indian rupee value. But on the same, when you are using a credit card to transact the same, you may have to pay 1% more as a tax collection at source, right? So here the shop will be collecting the source, or on the behalf of the shop. The credit card company in India, they will be deducting 1% more tax. They will be including this 1000 rupees plus 1% more tax, and that will be the TCS that is levied. But recently the government of India, they abolished the credit card tax on tax collected on source guidelines. So on credit card transactions, up to a limit, you do not have a particular charge. But on the rest of the services, recently the TCS has been included. While this TCS does not mean that that tax is properly and finally paid to the government, the people, or say the residents, they can later get a refund from the government of India also. But this implementation is actually leading to less and less investments, or say transactions in the remittance scheme abroad. Next, there are economic certainties such as fluctuating exchange rate, as we have seen right now. There is heavy amount of depreciation, appreciation of domestic currency right now. So there is uncertainty right now. So that is why the transactions have gone down. Inflation in the Indian say economic scenario, in the foreign economies, is also a prominent scene. And finally, a shift in spending patterns is also seen, where right now we are getting many services within the country itself, so we do not have to go abroad. And also there are various amounts of, say, issues when it comes to the students studying abroad and so on. So the spending patterns of Indians have also changed. That is why spending has gone down. But as we see, right, from this particular data released by RBI, travel has been the largest amount of source for the remittance abroad, or say the outward remittance from India to the rest of the world. In the next one, we'll be looking into the recent tiger deaths in the state of Madhya Pradesh, where we have to understand, due to the negligency of the wildlife department, the deaths of the tigers have occurred. Now, when we talk about this issue, we have to firstly talk about the tiger conservation efforts in the country, where firstly this is governed by the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, and we also have the same National Tiger Conservation Authority, and this authority is having the Minister of the MOFCC, right, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Alongside we have 3 more members of Parliament, the Secretary of the MOFCC and a Minister of State. Its main mandate is to implement the Project Tiger, which we will be looking into the next slide, right, which is a major amount of and also very successful tiger conservation initiative. Next is also looking into the overall conservation of forests that can be leading to conservation of tigers in general, and the various other implementation of, say, collaboration of WWF, right, and the various international organizations related to tiger conservation. It is also trying to implement technology into detecting tigers, into maintaining tigers, and leading good amount of population increase of tigers over a period of time. Also looking into the various financial support for the various schemes and policies in this particular program. Now, NTCA's tiger reserves has 2 components: a core area where we have the area in which we have a lot of amount of, or rich amount of tiger population. Alongside the same, we also have this contiguous area, or say a buffer zone surrounding the core area, where we have various activities such as, say, mining activities, village industries can be located in this buffer area, but only with prior permission of the concerned authorities. But in this core area, no such of these activities are allowed. But under the Forest Right Act 2006, under the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, they can actually give some habitat rights, or say the living rights, or say the commercialized livelihood rights to the tribal populations of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups in the country. Now can you in the comment section let me know how many PVTGs in the countries are as of now. We have covered this in the previous analyst sessions. Now, when we look at the Project Tiger was launched in 1972 at the Corbett National Park. Since then, it has spread to more than 75,000 tigers reserve, as we can see, across the various states of the country. Right now, India has more than 3,000 as to 3,682 tigers in the nation, where Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka, Uttarakhand, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, they are the top 5 states with the highest amount of tigers. When we look at the reserves with the highest amount of tiger populations, we have Jim Corbett, Bandipur, Nagarhole, Bandhavgarh and the Dudhwa tiger reserves. So it is very important for all of you to please go through this map, pause your screen and look at the various aspects of the tiger reserve and the location, most importantly. And here, recently the deaths have been caused due to the negligence, as we have seen at Bandhavgarh and the Shahdol tiger conservatory project in the state of Madhya Pradesh. As we can see here, right, the Panpatha Wildlife Sanctuary is located near to the Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve, a very important reserve for the conservation of the tiger, where there have been alleged negligence of former field directors, and this is what led to the death of around more than 30 tigers in this particular state, that is 34 tigers during the time period of 2021 to 23. Also along the same side, we have seen the same case in Maharashtra, where India lost 204 tigers in 2023, where most of them were in Maharashtra, right? Then we have high instances of poaching and unscientific maintenance by the authorities there, and also we have seen dwindling or in decreasing amount of prey base for the tigers in the country too. And also government says, according to the government data, we have 628 tigers which died in the past 5 years, which is a very sad scenario for the country. So tiger conservation must be definitely be stepped up over a period of time. And this is where we get a 2018 PYQ. Now please, in the comment section, will let me know what is the answer to the same. Finally, we'll be looking at Prelims Snippets, where we'll be discussing firstly about vaccine-derived polio. Now, polio is caused by a virus, that is why it is also called a poliovirus disease. This virus invades the nervous system and causes permanent paralysis, as you can see in this picture. Now, wild cases of polio is not seen in the world as of now. The last was seen in 2016 in some parts of Africa. In India, we did not have a live polio case or a wild polio case as of now. And polio is spread generally person to person contact and can rapidly spread within the community. So safety, cleanliness in a community is also very important. And most of the infected, that is 90% of the affected individuals, they do not have any symptoms or they have mild symptoms. That is why they escape medical attention. And here in this news article, we will be seeing the very extremely rare case of vaccine-derived polio. And these types of polio are not from the direct transmission of direct occurrence of wild polio samples. This is actually the polio which has been the polio virus which has been transmitted via the oral polio vaccine. And this is how we understand a weakened virus in this oral polio vaccine can mutate with reference to the various excretion of particular affected individual. Now if that excretion is not properly discarded off, it can lead to circulation in this particular community, and that is why this is also known as circulating vaccine derived polio virus. Now this circulating virus, they can circulate in the community that can infect some other people who have low immunity, and generally areas with low immunization rates or poor sanitation, they are prone to this. And India was actually declared polio free in 2014, but we have had very rare occurrences of vaccine derived polio from time to time due to lack of immunization and lack of sanitation. In the next article, we'll be looking into rights issue, which is a type of equity financing. That is, whenever a company needs more and more capital, it offers the opportunity to its existing shareholders to buy some additional shares directly from the company. And this will be at a discounted price. Now, why do company conduct rights issues? To raise capital, to have more money to expand the business, to pay the previous debt maybe, or to acquire some other companies. Actually, this can also actually be helpful for the existing shareholders to maintain more control of the company, because they are now getting more and more shares, more and more ownership of the company. This can also to just reward the existing shareholders at time to time. Now, what are the advantages? Firstly, we need to know that this dilutes ownership less than other measures. That obviously, if you are offering new shares, the existing shares and the overall ownership of the company is kind of diluted if you're releasing some new shares. That is true, but we have to understand that this dilution is less from the other types of methods, right, such as FPOs and other types of stock holding share patterns. And also this leads to potential offering for capital gains for the existing shareholders. Next, the disadvantage is that it can lead to a decline in stock price, share price, if this is not well received. As we have seen, this can lead to capital gains. For example, it can lead to more and more increase of stock price in the market if this rights issue is being issued. This is the advantage. But if that is not well received by the people, right, if the people did not expect it properly, then the price will be crashing, and this can be also time consuming to release in the market. In the next one, we'll be looking into Competition Commission of India. This was established in March 2009, and it consists of a chairperson and 6 members appointed by the central government. The main powers and functions is that it investigates the alleged anti-competitive practices of the various, say, companies of the various private sector in the country. It can issue order to any companies or various private sector which are involved in abuse of dominant position, involved in monopoly practices, or say in any other unfair business practices. It can also control the mergers of various companies if it is seen that the merger can maybe lead to say kind of monopoly, as also is being case right now of the proposed merger between Disney and Reliance Cinema and so on. Next, it is also trying to promote competition awareness and education among the consumers of the country. It is deriving the power, it is a statutory body, it is deriving a power from the Competition Act of 2002, which prohibits anti-competitive behavior, agreements, abuse of dominant position, and the various mergers and acquisitions that are anti-competitive. And it provides for penalties and remedies too. Next, we have finally the International Space Station, which is a large spacecraft at low Earth orbit. It is right now seen in the news due to the situation of Sunita Williams being trapped in the ISA for the long period of time. So this was actually been conceptualized, being used as a laboratory for conducting scientific research in microgravity, and this has been continuously being occupied since November 2000. That means almost every year there is a person, there is an astronaut who stays at the ISS and carries on various scientific research. The partners in this project are NASA, Roscosmos, JAXA, ESA and Canada, right? And in this orbit, we have to understand this is circling the orbit every 90 minutes over the Earth, right, and an altitude of around 400 kilometers. The scientific research that they do is microgravity experiments, astronomy and astrophysical observations, technology development such as biotechnology, and also human physiology. So these are all the important topics. I thank you all for being a very patient audience. So we'll be meeting in the next analyst, but please do follow the quiz and please solve the quiz and let me know the answers in the comment section. Thank you.